Thanks for clicking! Canada has been granted a 30-day reprieve from those 25% tariffs that were sure to devastate our economy.
I won.
I guess. In exchange for that 30-day stay, Canada has agreed to spend $1.3 billion on border security and provide 24-hour border surveillance, a plan they had already agreed to in mid-December, and will be appointing a fentanyl czar and has agreed to designate cartels as terrorists, which should obviously be raising red flags to anybody that's been paying attention, as it's difficult to believe that a fentanyl czar was the real sticking point that brought Canada to the economic brink. I had made the point a few weeks ago in the lead up to these non-tariffs that since the president's arguments weren't making any sense, that something else was at work, power relations, which I think can provide us with a useful understanding of the game that is unfolding before our eyes. A power move, weakening Canada's position as much as he can in order to extract maximum concessions. So what I want to do today is very briefly go over Canada's 30-day reprieve, take a look at some theories of power as a lens through which we can understand currently unfolding events, and then discuss some implications stemming from this worldview. If the past few weeks are any indication, this is going to be a very tumultuous 4 years for the Canadian economy, but we will obviously continue to track how this all unfolds on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, let's get into this tariff reprieve. On to the tariff reprieve. As mentioned, President Trump brought Canada's economy to the brink, and in exchange for a $1.3 billion border security plan, 24/7 surveillance, a fentanyl czar, and listing cartels as terrorists, the president agreed to put those tariffs on pause for 30 days, which obviously raises a number of questions. First and foremost, given that Canada had already agreed to that $1.3 billion security plan and the 24/7 surveillance, was a fentanyl czar and bureaucratic designations the real sticking point? Those two issues couldn't have been worked out during Danielle Smith's trip to Mar-a-Lago or Melanie Joly's trip to meet the Secretary of State. Was Kevin O'Leary not able to suss this out during his multiple meetings with the president at Mar-a-Lago?
An expert negotiator has been called in.
Well, of course not, because they were all playing the wrong game. As I discussed a few weeks ago, this was never about the border, this was never about the unfairness, the $200 billion non-existent deficit. This was an exercise in power. Very briefly, I promise, on power, let's take a look at Thomas Hobbes, who, back in 1651, wrote in Leviathan that anarchy ensues when a system lacks a centralized political authority. An anarchic environment is what we see when we look at the international order, or lack thereof. There's no 911 number to call when trouble starts brewing, and as such, living without a centralized authority, life can be nasty, brutish, and short. And it's this system, says Hobbes, that leads countries to pursue political power, seeking domination over one another. So, the lack of a central authority, a lack of an international police force, causes states to pursue power first and foremost as a means of survival. No one is coming to help you if trouble arises, so you have to help yourself. This school of thought is called Realism, well known in international relations theory. Next, and last I promise, comes Hans Morgenthau, author of Politics Among Nations. Morgenthau posited that the three ways in which the pursuit of power are manifested is through seeking, maintaining, and demonstrating power. So it's not enough just to seek power, it's not enough just to maintain power, you also have to show others that you're willing to use power. And that's what we just witnessed. A very harsh reminder coming from President Trump as to who calls the shots. That Canada's economy can run, or not, entirely on the whims of the U.S. president. I had noted a few weeks back that since the underlying arguments being made by Trump didn't make any sense, that we didn't have a $200 billion deficit, that we had already offered to secure the border, that power relations were what really was at work in Trump's negotiating, that this was all a negotiating tactic on the part of Trump as he sought to maximize the U.S. position as it tried to negotiate with Canada vis-a-vis the free trade agreement. Something else is at work, and my guess is that something is pure power politics. And that's exactly what is happening now, with Trump noting on Truth Social that we're now going to see if a final economic deal with Canada can be structured. The president wanted to make it very real in Canada's understanding the damage that the United States is able to inflict upon us, and judging by the headlines, which Trump sees too, he very much exercised that power.
Don't put me to the test.
So now that we understand the game, Well, you and I do. It'll take the others to catch up a bit.
Because Trump got rolled by both of these countries.
We have so much in common.
And I think it's important that we recognize the game that is being played here, as the media, our political leaders, focused for weeks on what the president wanted, and as we saw, what the president really wanted was to demonstrate that he can do whatever he wants, and we're powerless to stop it. Point well taken. But now that we understand the game, now that we understand the game that's being played by President Trump, what's that mean for the rest of us? What are the implications stemming therefrom? Well, unfortunately, the implications aren't great for Canada, as we're going to have to manage A, letting the president know that we understand that the United States is top dog, the biggest guy on the block, and B, not letting the president get to the point where he doesn't see Canada as a threat to U.S. interests. President Trump knows very well the damage that Canadian tariffs could do to the U.S. economy. Relatively less damage than theirs to ours, but damage nonetheless. I don't think he ever really wanted the tariffs, he just needed to show us that he could. He needed to scare us into submission, and we, quite rightly, showed that we were properly scared. The president got what he wanted. Which unfortunately means that the next time that this happens, and there will be a next time, maybe within a week or so, he's going to need to think he won. We're going to need to find inconsequential stuff that we can give him to show him that we recognize that he's the biggest guy on the block.
No, I know. You're the boss.
No, but seriously, and I want to stress this, the U.S. pursuing its interests defined in terms of power definitely isn't anything new, and it's not unique to Republican or Democrat. We saw this in Afghanistan, we saw it in Iraq, Libya, Iran, etc. What is new is the short-term thinking. You can exercise power all you want, but it has diminishing returns. Stephen Lukes, author of Power, A Radical View, wrote that the most effective and insidious form of power is to prevent conflict from arising in the first place. Meaning, I can use my strength, I can use my power to make you do whatever I want. And you'll do it, but if you'll do whatever I want without me even having to tell you, without me having to use my power, then that's a much more powerful, much more effective form of power. As in the former example, I'm creating resistance. And that's what the president is engendering right now through this use of power. Resistance, which I think is on full display, as I think a large portion of our population is going to be looking towards our leaders, demanding that the economy diversify away from the United States. Now, I don't pretend to be able to predict the actions or the mindset of the U.S. president, but had you have used a realist approach to understanding the president's actions over the past few weeks, you would have been able to predict that non-tariff outcome.
Yes, but at what cost?
And this school of thought is also predicting other actions being undertaken by the president as well. John Mearsheimer, another realist, wrote The Tragedy of Great Power Politics, and in that book writes that a country needs to establish itself as a regional hegemon, the regional biggest guy on the block, before it can really dominate the entire world. And we're seeing that play out with the Panama Canal right now, as Trump tries to prevent China from challenging the U.S. role as the regional hegemon in this hemisphere. Power politics isn't going to explain and predict everything that occurs over the next few years, and of course leaders make mistakes, there's miscalculations, etc., but it is a useful lens through which we can try to understand what the president really wants when he makes some of the ridiculous demands that we're no doubt going to see over the next few years. We will obviously continue to track how this all unfolds and the implications for Canada's economy on this channel. Click like and subscribe if you want to get those updates, but for now, thanks so much for watching.